So, Tim, I'm so happy to have you on the show today. Welcome. And thank you for everything that you do. You're very multifaceted, and you're a hypnotherapist, a hypnotist, and you also do developmental work with people and help people change their bad behaviors really quickly. And so you're a lot of people's favorites when you come on people's show because we all want to know what you have to offer.
Yes.
So, Tim, tell me a little bit about what I want to talk about today is anxiety and how we can reemerge from this COVID pandemic situation feeling less anxious and more connected. And also, I want to tap into your hypnotherapy work just a little bit. But what are you working with clients right now as far as anxiety in particular?
Well, that's a great question, and thanks for having me on your program today, Leah. It's always fun to be with you. So, when it comes to anxiety, anxiety is kind of like a fire alarm that's in our brain, and it keeps getting tripped, and it keeps telling us that something's wrong, something's bad. And even when there's nothing really that's harmful, it keeps getting triggered anyway. And what I've learned over the years is that it's because of these unconscious beliefs that we absorbed into us when we were little kids. And we're not really responding to the situations that we're dealing with in the moment. We're responding based on how we were programmed in the past.
Yes.
So, and I'm sure you've experienced this in your work as well. So, if there is an underlying belief that I'm not safe, which is something that I had from my dad almost dying, from being bullied and picked on, and all kinds of uncomfortable experiences, I formed this belief that I'm not safe and I'm not good enough to be able to take care of myself.
Yes.
And that is what drove all the other fears, all the other stress, all the other pressures. And I find that when people are struggling, it's because they're solving the wrong problem.
Ah,
Instead of dealing with the beliefs that are at the core of our anxiety, they're trying to deal with the symptoms. Well, I eat too much, or I'm procrastinating, or I'm fighting with my spouse. I have COVID fatigue, but
yeah.
that's not really the root of the issue. And so that's
Right.
what I've been focusing on helping people with.
I love that. And I know you haven't read my book yet because it just came out and I haven't sent you a copy. But
Yes. Well, congratulations though on that
thank
launch.
you.
That's
Yeah,
very
and you have several
exciting.
books too. We'll talk about in just a minute. In the
Yeah.
book, I talk about exactly what you're talking about, and I call them emotional imprints and how we can raise our vibration and change our story
Mm.
by releasing that emotional imprint. So I love to hear what you're saying right now. We are so in line. It's
Yes.
terrific.
Yes.
So someone has these limited beliefs or these fears or these feelings of I'm not enough, I'm not safe, I'm not okay. And
Yeah.
then what happens in today's world, like in the present moment, when the anxiety comes up? Obviously, we're not consciously resourcing those fears or those
Mhm.
feelings of low self worth. What
Mhm.
actually happens in our subconscious?
So our unconscious mind is always at work. It's always monitoring how we're feeling and how we're behaving, and the stuff that we focus on. And so if you are not paying attention to, Carl Jung said it best. He said that the goal in life is to make the unconscious conscious, or it will rule your life and you will call it fate.
Ah,
Right.
yeah.
And so uh, really the work to be done is trying to identify, what do I believe in a situation where I'm scared? So let's say I have anxiety, I'm freaking out, I'm really stressed because COVID has messed up my business, or I haven't been able to leave the house in a year, or I hate wearing a mask, or I miss seeing my friends. And we're having all this anxiety and fear. And then what we would do is ask ourselves, what would I have to believe in order to feel this way? Because a lot of times people don't realize that it's not the situation, it's how you're interpreting the situation that's determining how you feel. And they'll learn that from reading your books, right? Or
Yes.
reading mine.
Yeah.
And so when you realize that you're telling yourself a story and you're reacting to the story you're telling yourself and not the situation itself, it gives you influence. You can make yourself feel scared. You can also make yourself feel empowered, safe, secure, loved, resourceful, resilient. You can make yourself feel any way you want. But most people don't realize they're making themselves feel anything. They think they're just reacting to reality. And if you don't realize this, you're delusional.
Yes.
But what's delusional is the story that we tell ourselves, where we pretend that somehow we are small and we are weak and we are fragile, when human beings are extraordinary.
Right. I love that. And I talk about it in my work as far as coming into the conscious mind and being
Mhm.
aware, just as you're saying, of the unconscious story or the programming. However, what about for people who feel absolutely stuck, whether they're having repetitive thoughts, whether they're having night terrors, whether they feel all encompassed with this looping memory, PTSD, trauma, however you look at it in your work. Um,
Yeah.
does the same principle apply? Because some people would say, oh, well, that's easy. Well, I can tell you, for one, coming into your conscious mind isn't necessarily easy until we have
Mhm.
practice and we have the resources we need, to do that. But what about when
Yeah.
someone's really feeling stuck and they just keep worrying, keep dwelling? What do you say for that?
So there's a variety of tools that we can use, but the one that I use the most, the very first time I meet somebody who's struggling with any of that, is what I call the awakening, and it's just about going back to that original event or experience where people formed the belief in the very beginning, when they first formed the belief, and it happens when we're little, and it happens out of our conscious awareness. Some experience happens, and then we make a belief about it. What does this event mean about me or you or the world around me, or what kind of world that I live in? And that belief, what we need to do is go find that initial sensitizing event and empower you. Experience it in a new way where you feel empowered, where you're viewing it from the position of a wise adult instead of a scared child.
Yes.
When you're going through experiences and you're 7 years old, I'm about to be 51. So if I went through an experience where my dad said, "You're so dumb, you're never going to learn anything," because he was mad, right? And I'm 7 years old and I internalize that as, I am dumb, I'm never going to learn anything.
Mm,
Well, if I hear that at my age now, I'd be like, come on.
right.
I'm smart. You're stressed. This is your stuff, not mine. And if I made a mistake, I'll learn from it and move on. Right. And I would be loving and encouraging of myself. But you don't do that when you're little. And
Right.
so when we're little, we absorb that as truth. And so when you go back to the original event, the problem with positive thinking is that you're trying to cut the top off a weed. You're
Yes.
not getting to the root. So it keeps growing
Exactly.
back. And that's why
Yes.
people keep fighting themselves and struggling. So if you go back to that original event and you provide love, self-acceptance, safety, protection, encouragement, and you give it to yourself instead of waiting for someone else to come save the day, that changes everything. And then you ask yourself, what would you rather believe instead moving forward? So you change the experience that you have, and then you change and upgrade the belief that went along with it. And so, like today, I was working with somebody and she said, "Today, I finally feel like I fully love myself." And it's the first time I've ever really been able to say that. And she's 60 years old,
Wow.
right?
Well, I love what you're saying. And again, in my language, I talk about in the terms of healing your inner child and doing this
Yes.
inner child work.
Yes.
Now, for you, you come at it for many years now as a hypnotist.
Mm-hmm.
And I know, I've been in the line work about the same amount of time as you. You have a few years on me, and I appreciate that. But I can imagine when you first started as a hypnotist,
Mm-hmm.
for a good while, there was a lot of negative reaction to hypnotherapy.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah, people poo-pooed it and thought it was something,
Yeah.
outrageous and it wasn't helpful.
Yes.
But now we're finding it's extremely helpful to work with the subconscious mind. So when you became a hypnotist and started working with people, is that the way that you access their old beliefs and patterns, through hypnotherapy or through hypnotizing them?
Yes. Yeah. It was one of the very, very first approaches that I learned out of a book from Dave Ellman, who used to teach only medical doctors hypnosis. And it was a book called Hypnotherapy. And they just talked about going back to those initial sensitizing events and changing the experience, and it would break the spell. And it was
Wow.
magical, right? So, I mean, I have thousands of stories because I facilitated 15,000 individual hypnosis sessions over a 25-year period. So, which is a
Wow.
lot of sessions. So
So
one
we could
after
say you're
another.
experienced.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I've got a lot of experience
Yeah.
and working with everybody with everything. And my specialty started to become post-traumatic stress and anxiety and panic attacks. And I mean, a lot of the same stuff that you work with. And So I've had a wide range of experiences where people were coming in, and one person would be a president of a company and stressed out and overwhelmed about their business. Someone else would want me to help them get off heroin, and someone else wanted me to help them lose weight, and then someone else couldn't function because of their OCD. I mean, it was just such a wide range.
Right.
But I found that the I don't want to say the cures, but the solutions were always the same. It was go back, change the beliefs, go from I can't to I can. I'm not good enough to I am enough. I'm not worthy of love to I am worthy of love. And then give some new tools and some new ways of helping people to process what they've experienced in a way that's empowering instead of destructive. And it was magic. It was like
Well,
real magic for everybody.
yeah, I can see it could be. But again, I want to just emphasize for people listening that, you've already made it clear that the optimist or the positivity is like cutting off the top of the weed, right?
Mhm, mhm.
But this idea of I can't and I can, I think people get confused of just trying to apply affirmations and positive self-talk, which are all beautiful tools to use. I'm not saying that they aren't.
Mhm.
But what you're talking about is something beyond that, actually
Yeah.
shifting the belief. Actually, one of your books is called One Belief Away.
Yes.
And I believe you wrote that with, you co-authored that with Dr. Joe Vitale. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So this idea of changing the belief is where the power is. Just like if we're talking with our inner child, we're not just looking at the inner child and
Yeah.
telling the inner child everything's going to be okay. We're
Mhm.
actually reparenting that child to let them relearn new skills and confidence and courage and safety and love. And I think what you're saying through hypnotism is you're going and doing a very similar thing with the subconscious mind or unconscious mind, by reprogramming that thought, right?
Yeah, that was beautifully said. We are doing the exact same thing.
Mm.
Hypnosis is just a word that describes the process of working with your subconscious mind, because that's where the beliefs, the habits, the attitudes, the experiences are stored. So the magic isn't hypnosis. The magic is you and your mind,
Mm.
and that you're the magic, right? And so hypnosis got a bad rap because of the entertainment side of it, where people are clucking like a chicken and running
Right.
around, and
I
Dracula
forgot about
movies,
that. Yeah.
or the Get Out movie, or say Kevin Bacon movies, where they're using hypnosis, and then all of a sudden people are acting crazy.
Right.
But that's not what it is at all, especially in the clinical use, the way that I use it. But it's the same thing. We're talking about the same thing. We're going back. We're empowering the little girl or the little boy inside of us, and giving them new resources that if they would have had them to begin with, they would have had a more empowering life. And so we're going to go back and we're going to give them these new resources, and it shifts things. I mean, it's amazing how people are able to, because when you change your beliefs, it changes what you focus on.
Yes.
And then what you focus on, changes how you feel. And then how you feel changes how you behave. Right. And that all works together.
Yeah.
If you don't go to the source and change those beliefs, and you're just trying to use vision boards and affirmations, you're going to be arguing with yourself. You're going to
And
be like,
constant
yeah,
conflict, and you're going to be in
constant.
constant conflict. Yep.
That's
Well,
exactly
I
right.
want to learn a little bit more just out of personal interest, but also for the audience about how you do hypnotism. I'm not, is it hypnotherapy, hypnotism?
So
What's
hypnosis
the
is, yeah, I guess
hypnosis?
hypnosis is just, getting people into that relaxed state, and then suggesting, that they focus on something or feel something or behave in a specific way. And that's generally what hypnosis is. Hypnotherapy is the work we're talking about. We're actually
Okay.
going back and healing people and reparenting.
I gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
So either case though, I think just to help someone who hasn't experienced this before, when you're in this state working with a professional and you're being, well, now I don't want to say hypnotized, but when you're
Okay. Yeah. When you're in the trance.
when you're in the trance, you still have, the person still has control of themselves. A
Yes, they
lot of
do.
people still have this idea, they have fear around losing control and allowing someone else to control their mind or their body or their experience. But
Yeah.
I've done hypnotherapy before many times and found it very helpful at different points of
Mhm.
my own spiritual growth and so forth.
Yeah.
And it was almost more subtle than what I had imagined,
Mhm.
the amount of control that a person still has.
Yeah.
And I just want you to speak to that a little bit to alleviate anyone's fears about, what we're talking about and how that works.
Well, I would always laugh and use a little pattern interrupt. If someone came into my office and they said, well, I don't know if this is going to work for me. I don't want to feel like I'm out of control. I'm like, isn't that why you're here?
Ah,
Aren't you already out of control? Aren't
right.
you
Well, that's
already
a good
feeling
point.
bad? Hypnosis puts you back in control.
Mm,
Gnosis is just a way of teaching you how to use the power of your mind to create your life by design. It's teaching you how to use the tools and the resources you already have inside of you. You just don't know that you have those resources, or no one ever taught you how to access them. So it actually puts you more in control than you are right now.
wow, I love that. That's a great summation of and exactly what it does. I remember one of the way back in the day, probably 20 something years ago, I had anxiety so severely that I couldn't drive a car on a highway. I
Yeah.
just every time, I had the programming happening and then I had it all associated with driving and highways and all of it.
Yep.
And I went to this woman in Kentucky. You're in Indianapolis, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm originally from Kentucky. I
Hmm.
went to this woman in Kentucky, and I think it was my second session with her.
Hmm.
And I can't explain exactly what happened for me, but
Hmm.
I had that resolution that you're speaking about. I kind of walked out of the office. I felt empowered. I felt like myself again. And
Hmm.
the whole thing about feeling anxious about driving on a highway kind of seemed ridiculous to me at the time,
Hmm.
and I got
Yeah.
right in my car. I got right on the highway and it all looked different.
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
was amazing. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I've had really positive results with that. I know a lot of people come to hypnotherapists for addictions
Hmm.
and other kind of distressing, behavioral issues.
Sure.
Do you find it effective quickly for those scenarios as well, or does it take more
Yes.
work?
No, it works really well. So there's two approaches, right? So the first approach is to upgrade the beliefs, because our insecurities cause us to go to sugar, alcohol, cigarettes, other drugs to numb it out or to get comfort, right? And so our brain is always trying to increase comfort or avoid pain. And so we develop all kinds of, human beings, as you know, have this horrible habit of trying to avoid pain by doing things that create more of it.
Hmm. Yes.
And
I call it
so,
we're addicted to pain. That's what I call that.
yeah, yeah. And so the more we try to get away from it, the more we create. And so, um, what we do is we upgrade the beliefs. And then the second part is giving them new life skills, new strategies. So we're associating pain to the old way, to the old drugs, to the old habit, and pleasure to the new way. Because a lot of times, even if they go to a hypnotist, the hypnotist will help break the habit, but they never teach them what to do instead. And that's such
Mm,
a mistake. It's like if someone wants to stop smoking. I mean, I've helped probably 1,000 people stop smoking over the years. And I always, step one is we break the old habit. And step two is, what are you going to do instead? Because if you don't develop the new habits and the new resources, you're going to go back to the devil,
right.
And so, and it has worked whether it was alcohol or heroin or cigarettes or sugar. It didn't really matter. Um, when we upgraded the beliefs and then we gave new coping skills, and then they had a new way to relax. That's the other component of it, is that if you take away the thing that they think is giving them comfort and then they don't have anything else, that's horrible.
Right.
So when you think about when people go to AA, or when you think about people are trying to lose weight, and you take away the one thing that they think is their best friend that's making them feel better, that's helping them cope, and then you don't teach them what to do instead, they always relapse. They always
So
regain the weight.
yeah, no, I agree. But so when you say teach them what to do instead, so you could tell
Mhm.
me right now, you could tell all of us 5 things to do instead, but is it
Mhm.
more effective in the session of like a hypnotherapy session to tell our unconscious mind or subconscious mind those things? Is that correct?
Yes. Yes, because you're getting it into your subconscious mind. And your subconscious mind's kind of like your computer brain. It runs programs. You type it in, you're the geek squad for your brain. You type it in, it runs the program. If you just tell yourself consciously without getting it into that part of your mind, then you argue with yourself. I want to eat healthier foods. I don't want that though. I'm going to drink more water. I hate water.
Right,
Right.
right.
I'm not going to smoke anymore. And oh my God, I really need a cigarette. And then we go do that. So when you're in that relaxed, open, suggestible state of mind, and you imagine yourself um, behaving in this new way, not just telling yourself what you want, but imagining yourself the way you want to be, and then creating emotion behind it. I
Mm,
find that one way we sabotage ourselves is when we talk about what we don't want, we fill it with emotion. Oh, this is never going to work. It's never, oh, I hate it. I'm so stressed. When we talk about what we do want and what we're hopeful about, we're like, oh, I hope it works.
right.
I'm got my fingers crossed.
It's so interesting and so true. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So all you do is reverse that. When you talk about what you want, even if you have to pretend at first, fake it till you become it, but you talk with passion about what you want. I got a quick story I can share with you if you're interested.
Okay.
Virginia was coming to me for weight loss, and she had lost some weight, but she was struggling a little bit. And I was doing a group class at the time, and I heard her talking about her Southern cooking. And she was talking about, oh, my fried chicken is the best there is, and my
Right.
biscuits and gravy and rice are big as saucers, and everybody's salivating. And she's just talking about her Southern cooking. And I said, Jenny, tell me about the healthy food. And she goes, what, like rabbit food, like
Yes.
salads and carrots, and I'm like, you're making your Southern cooking sound amazing. And you're making the healthy food that would get you what you want sound boring and trite. I said, switch that around. And she looked at me like I had two heads. I said, start talking about your healthy food like it's amazing. Start talking about your Southern cooking like it's boring. So I saw her 3 weeks later. She's all smiles. She comes walking in. I'm like, Jenny, why are you smiling? She says, I'm down 7 pounds. And I'm like, you are? I'm like, what have you been doing? She says, let me tell you about my Hawaiian lunches. I get out my wooden bowl and I get all my greens and I get my treats from the garden. I'm like, what are your treats? And she says, my tomatoes and my peppers, my cucumbers. And I get a glass of water with a slice of sunshine, a little lemon on there. I'm like, that sounds amazing. I said, what about the fried chicken? She goes, fried chicken. She says, ew, gross. That makes me feel greasy.
Wow.
She had
Good for
switched
her.
it.
Yep.
Yeah. She switched how she was
Yeah.
describing. And so when you add all of these little tricks, all these little mind tools together, it creates a whole new level of motivation, momentum, confidence, and drive so that you're not trying to talk yourself into it. You want to do this.
Yeah, I love that. Well, I want to talk quickly about, well, not quickly, we don't have to be quick about it, but I want to get to your 1 minute anxiety cleanser so
Okay.
that people that are struggling right now can apply this if it may work for them. So, what is your 1 minute anxiety cleanser?
Oh, great question. So, and I just want to point out something real quick, what you just did. For everybody that's listening, you will notice that when people are really practicing mindfulness, they will correct themselves right in the moment, right?
Mm,
So when you said we don't have to be quick, we can be in the moment and we can be, you are correcting right in the moment. That's what mindfulness really is. It's recognizing that we just said something. It's not how we want it to be. So we're just going to adjust it and then move on. There's
yeah,
no criticism. There's no beating ourselves up for it. There's no, oh my gosh, I did it again. I'm so embarrassed, because that's not what you do when you're being loving of yourself. You're just correcting on the fly.
well, thank you. I
So
appreciate that. That feels good to hear that.
absolutely. Yeah. So, okay. So then this 1 minute anxiety cure, you had anxiety. I had really bad anxiety. And so these are some tricks that I learned that work really well. 3 steps. Step number 1, use power breathing. Power breathing is when you breathe through your nose and you look up. I learned the look up part. If you're not driving right now, look up and try to get stressed.
Hmm.
What happens inside? It's like your brain goes blank, or you think
Yeah.
of something, but you're not really feeling it. You're not connecting with it. I learned this from helping people who struggle with depression. They are always looking down. When you look down, it turns out you're really connected with how you're feeling, and you're usually talking to yourself in your head and telling yourself a story. Life sucks. I'm never going to be able to get through this. There's nothing I can do about it. I'm trapped. And then you feel those horrible feelings. And it's like, see, it's getting worse. And we go into this loop that creates,
Mhm.
that all those yucky feelings. When you look up, it actually turns the voice off in your head. Instead of being auditory digital, where you're talking to yourself, you go visual, and it gets quiet in your mind. I would have people who are depressed, I'd say, stare up for a minute and put a smile on your face and notice what happens. And people would, after just a minute of looking up and smiling, would say, wow, I feel a little lighter inside. Why?
Wow.
That's so weird. right? So you look up, and then when you're breathing, you breathe through your nose.
Mm-hmm.
Most people, as you know, are mouth breathers,
Mm-hmm.
right? And mouth breathing creates that tension. When you're breathing through your nose down to your belly and you slowly exhale, and you do that 5 times in a row, it activates your brain's relaxation response. It's your built-in ability to feel calm and at ease. You start power breathing, and then you catch yourself yawning, or all of a sudden you're feeling a little bit more at ease. That's what's happening. So step 1, start with power breathing before you try to do anything else.
Okay.
Step 2, ask yourself a power question. Okay. William James, the founder of modern psychology, said the greatest discovery of the 20th century is the quality of your life is being determined by the quality of your thinking. And thinking really is the quality of the questions that you walk around asking yourself all day long. So what kind of questions do you ask yourself? Most people ask lousy questions. What's wrong? Whose fault is it? Why does it always have to be this way? How come things never work out for me? Why this? Why me? Why now? Right? And those just focus us on what we don't want and what we're unhappy about. And the more we focus on that, the more we get that.
Right.
So power questions focus on what's the outcome that I want? How do I want to feel? What's one action I could take to start to feel this way? What resources do I have? Who can I lean on for support? When you start to focus on those questions, you will find those answers. And then it will start to help you feel more at ease.
Can I add something to that point before
Please.
you move on?
Mm-hmm.
A bridge question that I use a lot, which I find helpful when I find myself or clients going in that repetitive negative questioning mode.
Yes.
The first question I ask is, what if you asked yourself, what if I didn't have to feel this way? And then redirect to, what would it be like to feel whatever? What do I want to feel? The questions like that you just mentioned. But I use that a lot for myself of, what if I don't have to feel this way?
Yeah.
I don't have to feel this right now. I don't have to feel this anymore.
Yeah.
And then move into the positive. So I just wanted to interject that.
Oh, it's brilliant. It's brilliant because it reminds you in the moment that 1, it's a choice. And 2, you have influence that
Right.
you can shift how you feel. You don't have to have a bad day or a bad week. Right. Or a bad hour.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
So I love that. Yeah.
Good.
What if I don't have to feel this way? Or what if I could feel, I mean, that's all really, really good.
Good.
Yes.
Yeah. Thanks for
So
letting me interject into your plan.
no, the goal is to have our plan,
Yes.
where you have your tools, I have my tools, then we bring them together. And then whoever we're working with, we start to get them to add to the plan as well. Because, when people start adding to it and taking responsibility, and pretty soon they start to feel like the ideas are coming from them, they will own it.
Right.
If it came from them, they will own it. Yeah. And people, especially like in a team, I work with a lot of teams, people support what they co-create. So we're always co-creating and collaborating, which is why I was so excited to be on your program specifically, because I am, familiar with all the amazing work that you do. And so I figure you put us together.
Yeah.
Something cool is going to happen.
Right.
All right. So the third tool is a really cool technique, and I'll just explain it real quick. But what you want to do is you want to take a thought or a feeling and change the way your brain is processing it. So it doesn't require positive thinking or reframing or cognitive behavioral therapy or any of that stuff. You're just changing how your brain is processing information. So what I do is, if I'm anxious, I might imagine that I've got this ball of energy inside of me. If you're feeling anxiety and you're listening to this, imagine noticing what you're feeling and then give it a color and a shape. Okay. So people say it's like this black blob on my head, or like this red energy in my stomach. I want you to imagine giving it a color and a shape, and then imagine that it's spinning in a certain way. Because when we get anxious, when we get worked up, we speed up. I mean, do you think that you can have anxiety in slow motion?
No.
That doesn't work, right?
Right.
I'm freaking out. No, it doesn't work that way. So we speed up inside. So imagine that you've got this ball of energy and it's going round and round.
Yeah.
Notice which way it's spinning. Left to right, right to left, head over heels, like a little tornado, winding you up inside. And then what you want to do is imagine popping that energy out in front of you. Okay. Or imagine taking a quick step backwards and it pops out of you. Now you've got this ball of energy spinning in front of you. Then what you want to do is use your power breathing in your imagination. Imagine slowing that energy down.
Mm.
If you have a ceiling fan in your house and you turn the light switch off, the fan starts to go slower and slower, and then it finally comes to a rest. And every ceiling fan has a little slide switch. If you move that switch and you turn the power back on, it goes the opposite direction. It starts to go the other way, and it creates a new effect in your outer environment. Well,
Right.
we can create a new effect in your inner environment. So imagine slowing that spinning energy all the way down to a stop, and then rotate it the other way.
Hmm.
As you rotate it the other way, imagine it begins to change the color. Maybe it starts to switch to a purple, a blue, a green, some color that represents peace or love or relaxation or security. So as you reverse the spin, it creates a new color and a new energy, a new feeling, a new rhythm. When it's just the speed you want and just the color that you want and it feels good, bring it back in or
Mm.
step back into it and let that new feeling spread through you like a little wave of sunshine.
I love that. And while I'm hearing you, because of the work I do, I'm thinking all about our energy system and our chakras. And this is
Bet.
exactly how we can help balance and open our energy centers, which is going to
Exactly.
make us feel better right away as well. I love that analogy, though. I'm a very visual person, so that works tremendously for me. Some
Yeah.
people have a hard time visualizing, but still, I think when we access, like you said, access that feeling inside and give it a color and a shape,
Yeah.
that gives it a place to be, right away. It just gives it a place to be instead of being out of control and taking over your life. So that's
Exactly right.
great. Thank you for sharing those. So we've got power breathing and looking up.
Hmm.
We've got asking new questions about how we want to feel or think,
Your power
and then
question.
giving our emotion a shape and a color and bringing it outside of us, slowing it down and turning it the opposite way, and then taking it back in.
Yeah. Shift the color in the direction of the spin.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
great. Thank you so
And if
much.
you're welcome. And if you're kinesthetic and you're not really getting pictures, or you're more auditory and you're just trying to talk yourself through it, you can also do the spin with your hands and your fingers, right? So
Mhm.
you're twirling your hand around, and then you slow it down, and then you twirl the hand the other way. Or maybe if you're a real feeler, you might feel pressure in your chest, but where do you feel security? Well, I feel that in my heart.
Mhm.
Okay, well, imagine that you're taking that feeling in your heart and you're spreading it through your chest, right? And you're just taking that feeling and spreading it through your body. And then that way, people who are kinesthetic, they'll literally feel that expansion of that feeling of calm. And then it shifts your breathing. And then when you're feeling calm, it helps you to focus on what you want. When you're feeling calm, you're able to focus on the outcomes that you want. Most people are not feeling calm, and so they're trying to change how they're thinking while they're still freaking out,
Right.
and it doesn't work.
It doesn't work. No, it does not.
No.
And I'm reminded too, it's a very similar feeling when you get overwhelmed just in a busy day. Some
Yes.
people operate in this mode of overwhelm all day long and they're feeling
Mhm.
lost and scattered and frantic and
Yes.
unfocused and
Yeah.
all of that rather than when well, I like to make lists. So, I make my list the night before. I
Yes.
follow that. I know what I'm going to do throughout the day and I breathe and I stay calm to apply those things. But one
Yeah.
thing I want to say while we're talking about anxiety in particular, I've shared my anxiety, you shared yours.
Yeah.
And just because we've both been doing this work for a very long time, it doesn't mean that, anxiety is never going to affect me or you or
Right.
anyone else
Yeah.
again.
It still
Anxiety, I
shows
call
up.
it one of our greatest teachers. It's
Yeah.
giving us information. And I appreciate your tools so much. And there's so many tools out there. When people get into panic, it can be sometimes hard to go, oh, let me stop this panic right now and apply these tools that I just learned.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think, or just to recommend and remind people to use these practices ongoingly, however frequently they can, even when they're just feeling a little bit anxious, before
Yeah.
the panic takes over their life. And
Yeah.
to remember that, we're not trying to eradicate anxiety completely because it's a natural emotion that gives us information, but
Yeah.
that we have control over it. Do you agree?
Oh, 100%. Yeah,
Yeah.
100%. I love everything you said, because you're exactly right. And anxiety can be used as a friend. It's that little alarm system. So if something's going off and I'm feeling anxious, what am I afraid of?
Hmm.
What is the message? What am I trying to understand? I remember one time um, I was doing a training in Bismarck, North Dakota, and it was I wasn't leading the training. I was at a training, And people, we were supposed to do a quick exercise where we were going to give a 5-minute talk on a subject. And I started freaking out, like totally panicking. I went outside, I'm breathing heavy, and my buddy's like, "What's the matter?" And I'm like, "I don't know, I'm freaking out." And he's like, "Well, what if the anxiety is your friend and it's supposed to be helping you?" And I'm like, "Shut up, it's not, I hate it." Right. But he's like, "Yeah, but what if it was helping you? I mean, it's here." And so he said, "Instead of trying to get rid of it, why don't you give it a hug?" And I'm like, "Are you out of your mind?" Right. But I said, okay, I trusted him. So I said, "Okay, anxiety, I'm going to give you a hug and tell you that I love you and it's okay." The reason I didn't want to do that, Leah, is because I was afraid that it was gonna stay. Like it would never
Mhm.
go away if I
Right.
accepted it or surrendered, that I was
Right.
gonna get stuck in it. But that was the opposite of what happened.
It's the
And
opposite of
so
what happens. Yep.
yeah. So instead I gave it a hug and I said, "It's okay. You're here to help me. And thank you for being here and helping me." And then all of a sudden the feeling in about 10 seconds started to fade away. And then an insight popped into my mind. And it reminded me of a time where I wasn't prepared for something. I was
Hmm.
supposed to do a 3-hour program. The audience was really, they looked like they got chewed out before I got there. So it was rough. And I went through all my material in the first hour and a half.
Oh,
And
wow.
and I got through it and it was okay. But
Comedy hour
oh
coming.
yeah, it freaked me out. It was. I came in and I'm like, "Anybody got any jokes?" Literally that happened. And but it taught me that I have to always be over prepared.
Ah,
Okay. And so now as a speaker, if I come to do an hour program, I've got 2 or 3 hours of material. If I'm going to do a day workshop, I've got 3 days worth of material. I am always over prepared. And, but in that moment, I wasn't. So the anxiety was actually just trying to make sure that I was prepared.
right. There you go. Well, I love your story about the hug. And I have a similar story, but I didn't include the hug. And I just like to share real quick what happened to me.
Please. Yeah.
It was one of the first times I had a large speaking engagement. I was the keynote speaker and, hundreds of people. To make it even worse, I was in my home state, so I
Oh,
was
yes.
people that I knew out there.
Yeah.
And I got gripped by anxiety and panic
Yes.
in the first time in years, so it was kind of
Yes.
shocking. I was like, what's going on here?
Yes.
I did not give it a hug though. I tried to resist it the entire time. I remember, Tim, I couldn't move my head side to side. My
Yeah.
jaws were almost locked up. I don't remember a thing I said for that whole hour. It was like I was possessed and
Yes.
I barely got through it. So, when we're struggling with this anxiety, we
Yeah.
can hold on to it and be afraid of it and have an experience like I had,
Yeah.
or we can befriend it and know this is information and give it a hug or listen to what it's trying to teach us and have an experience like what you had. So, I think
Yeah.
it's really relevant information for people.
Well, I mean, that's a great story. I have felt possessed many times,
Yeah.
and no matter how many talks I've given, especially if it's in my hometown or something. And then
Oh, that's
those old
brutal.
issues of feeling like we have to prove ourselves,
Yeah.
that's what throws us off, afraid that someone's going to judge us,
It's
which
that
is,
old programming going
it's
on,
the old
right?
pro, because that's, what we spent our life changing. And
Right.
then to slip back into that, we're like, "No way, I
Right.
resolved you. Why are you here again? It's not
Right.
fair."
Right.
But it happens sometimes where it comes back just to kind of do a little check-in on us to see where we actually are at.
Yeah.
And so if it doesn't matter what shows up, what matters is how you show up. And so if you're in the grips of panic, we can shift that. We know how. And if you're not, or you're in between an episode, that's when you listen to this podcast. This is when you read, Leah's new books. This is when you do the workshops and the classes, because then you will get the tools, the skills, the awareness, the insights that are going to help you be prepared. So if that anxiety rears its ugly head again, you know how to deal with it, and you can turn fear, FEAR, into feeling excited and ready.
Ah, love that. That's a
Yeah.
great acronym. Well, Tim, before I let you go, I do want us to talk a little about the COVID situation.
Yeah.
And, this might be an evergreen topic, unfortunately, but it's
Mm.
certainly relevant right now.
Yes.
And y- I, I feel what I'm sensing and what I'm seeing is a lot of people are starting to have anxiety about not only that this is never going to end, but if it ends, feeling comfortable, reemerging in the world, interacting with people, feeling safe, and, you know, not getting sick or dying from
Yeah.
being out in the world again. So, again, we're still talking about anxiety and fear, but specifically to something that's didn't happen in our childhood. It's happening in our adulthood for most of it, or for a lot of us, I guess
Mhm.
half of us. I don't know what that proportion is, but it didn't happen in our childhood. For adults that are going through this right now,
Yeah.
how do you suggest to help them find their center and balance again?
Using the same tools. Go back and listen to this program again and again, and share it with your family, and listen to it with your spouse, and share it with your friends at work, because these tools are the same tools. The symptoms might be different, but it's the same process. People feel anxious when they don't know what's going to happen. The fear, people say, "Oh, I don't like change." I'm like, if you won the lottery tomorrow, you would love change. You don't
Right.
like what you think would be bad change, right? That every scenario that you're painting is going to be worse, that makes us worse. So we're going to be sick. We're going to die. We have to wear masks forever. We can't ever be with friends again. Those scenarios are the same kind of anxiety thoughts that would keep us from, that would have kept you from driving over highways. That would have kept me from doing public speaking, or even, doing a podcast at one time. And so what we got to do is recognize, what are we telling ourselves, and are we making ourselves feel safe, or are we making ourselves feel scared?
Yes.
You can scare yourself, or you can prepare yourself.
Right.
And so just pay attention to this COVID story you're telling yourself. When I this last year in 2020, I had worked really hard. I had keynotes every single month.
Mm-hmm.
I'd spent years building a practice, not building a speaking business. So I finally had all these keynotes. And then in March, they all went away.
I'm right there with you. The
Every one
exact
of them.
same thing happened to me.
Yeah. And you're like, no way,
Yeah.
that's not fair. And so, but what do you do with those opportunities?
Mm-hmm.
I finished my book, created a Legend Summit, started doing more interviews, got to hang out with you, and so it's, what do you do with it? It's not what shows up, it's how you show up. And so things are going to improve.
Yes.
People are getting vaccines. And I have noticed that nobody got the flu in my house.
Right.
Somebody
That's
was always
going
getting
down.
sick. Yeah. Nobody got sick.
Right.
We didn't have colds. We didn't have sore throats. We didn't have flus. We didn't have anything over our Indiana winter, which we usually all have something.
Right.
We didn't have any of that. So spring is, in the Midwest and the East Coast, it's starting to be nice outside again. And so we can get outside. So we're going to be okay.
Yes.
We're going to get stronger. I always tell people, if you knew the ending to every single movie, would it be fun to go to the movies?
Who'd watch it? I wouldn't spend $16 for that.
So your life is a movie, and you don't know the ending. You're not supposed to. Right? What kind of movie is it going to be? That's up to you.
Yeah, you get to play it out. You're the main star. Well, you're talking about having control over the situation. Another quick story, when I had to do my first MRI, I'd heard all the stories. I don't know that I'm claustrophobic, but I convinced myself that I was, and I was terrified to go get the MRI. The MRI is the one, or CAT scan. Which one's the one that you go
where they
into?
feed you into the tube.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So I made it. I tried to make it, and I felt I did a pretty good job. I made it like a spa experience. I took my own sleep mask. I took my essential oils and put them under my nose. I listened to my favorite music in the in the earbuds.
Yeah.
And I didn't even know what was going on. Like, it was actually kind of pleasurable. It was not
Can we do
scary.
this next week?
It wasn't scary at all. So I've given that tip to a few friends, but in the same fashion, different things make different people feel comforted and cheerful and hopeful and positive. And whatever that is for you, incorporate that. Start now incorporating that in your life. And as you walk out that door, if you don't feel comfortable being 3 feet from someone, then stay 4 or 5, 6 feet from someone. You get to choose, and we have to remember that we're the chooser. We're the ones making our movie, and we get to do that. So there's a lot of power in that.
There really is. If you wear a mask and you wash your hands, or if you go out and then you're around people and you come home and you take a shower, you are fine. Yeah. You're safe. You're going to be okay. Right. And so that's what we've been doing for a year, and we're fine. It's when people don't take it serious, and when people are making a lot of poor choices, that it catches up with them. And so we have the ability to show up, and it also is an opportunity to be able to gain new resources, learn how to have different conversations, not just with yourself, but with your spouse or with your kids or with your friends. Right. So it's an opportunity to be able to have new experiences that you might not have had otherwise. I mean, before the pandemic, I personally felt like I was on a runaway train that I could never get off of. I had built this hamster wheel as an entrepreneur that I could not get off of.
Right.
And it was stressful and frustrating so much of the time because I was so busy. And it seems like our world has shifted. It literally would have needed we needed a pandemic for most of us to be able to pause.
Right.
And start reassessing what really
and for women to
matters
stop
most.
wearing so much makeup, and for us to feel like we have to, show up perfectly, and all these things that we
Yes.
were doing for the
Yeah.
world or for some other, I
To
too,
prove
I
our
find
value.
to
To
prove
prove
our
our
value.
value.
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
find it a beautiful time to get more vulnerable and authentic,
Mm,
and we can
yes.
spend our time arguing with people on social media about the vaccine and about this and about that. But if you bring your focus and your control to you and what you need and who you are, then you're going to be okay. I'll
Yeah.
just say it that way.
The stress and the fighting and the yelling and the anxiety is worse than the COVID,
Yes. It's so
right? So
toxic.
yeah, that is more toxic and more dangerous to your health than the COVID-19.
Yeah.
And so that's why we've got to take a step back. Do not engage with people who want to yell, people who want to argue, people that want to prove they're right. Seek first to understand, then be understood. That's how you create trust and how you gain more information. Not I'm right and you're wrong, and now I'm going to yell until you see my point of view. That's not good leadership. It's not good communication. It doesn't build trust. So avoid it.
Yes.
They say to argue with, to idiots makes you one. And
Right.
not that people are idiots. It's just that people act from their level of awareness.
Yes.
And sometimes the people who are yelling the loudest have a very low level of awareness.
And a high level of fear, let's not forget that. So
Yes.
what are we
Yes.
feeding here? Right.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Tim,
So
I've loved having you on. Tell everyone what your website is and your books. I know I only mentioned one of them, but let us know how to find you.
yeah, if you go to timshurr.com, that's where most of my stuff is. If you go to Amazon, my One Belief Away book is out along with the other book that I just re-released called Get Out of Your Way. So those programs are full of tools. They give you lots and lots of tools, not how to live your life, but this is what you actually do to make it happen. And then I have a new program that you can give a copy of all your listeners and viewers. It's called The Power of Your Unconscious Mind. And you can get a free copy at powermindsetprogram.com.
Super.
Powermindsetprogram.com.
That's
Yeah.
great. Thanks for that offering. Thanks so
Yeah.
much for what you do. Continued success, health, luck, all those things to you.
Yes, you as well. Thank you so much for having me on your show and for all the good that you do in the world. And this was just a blast. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Talk soon.